Hi, Aqua Roomers. It's time for chapter reading. And if you remember, yesterday was a little bit scary. Laura and Mary and Ma and Pa heard the quarreling and the yipping and the scary sounds that were coming from the Indian camp, and they could not understand what it was. Finally, Pa stayed up that night, and he listened, and he looked out the window, and then he said, "Caroline, they are quarreling among themselves." At last, they went to bed, and in the morning, Laura woke up. Mary was sleeping beside her. The door was open, and by the sunshine on the floor, Laura knew it was almost noon. Ma was cooking dinner. Pa sat on the doorstep. He said to Ma, "There's another big party going off to the south." Laura went to the door in her nightgown, and she saw a long line of Indians far away. The line came up out of the black prairie, and it went farther away southward. The Indians on their ponies were so small in the distance that they looked not much bigger than ants. Pa said that two big parties of Indians had gone west that morning. Now, this one was going south. It meant that the Indians had quarreled among themselves. They were going away from their camps in the creek bottoms. They would not go altogether to their big buffalo hunt. That night, the darkness came quietly. There was no sound except the rushing of the wind. "Tonight we'll sleep," Pa said, and they did. All night long, they did not even dream, and in the morning, Jack was still sleeping, limp and flat on the same spot where he had been sleeping when Laura went to bed. The next night was still too, and again they all slept soundly. That morning, Pa said he felt as fresh as a daisy, and he was going to do a little scouting along the creek. He chained Jack to the ring in the house wall, and he took his gun and went out of sight down the creek road. Laura and Mary could not do anything but wait until he came back. They stayed in the house, and they wished that he would come. The sunshine had never moved so slowly on the floor as it did that day. But he did come back. Late in the afternoon he came, and everything was all right again. He had gone far up and down the creek and had seen many deserted Indian camps. All the Indians had gone away except a tribe called the Osage. In the woods, Pa had met an Osage who could talk to him. The Indian told him that all the tribes, except them, had made up their minds to be unkind to the white people who would come into the Indian country. And they were getting ready, and they were having a big powwow. And that's when the lone Indian came riding into their powwow. That Indian had come riding so fast and so far because he did not want them to scare or hurt the people. He was an Osage, and they called him a name that meant he was a great soldier. Soldat Duchesne, Pa said his name. He kept arguing with them day and night. Pa said till the other Osages agreed with him. Then he stood up and told the other tribes that if they started to be unkind, started to hurt anybody, the Osages would fight them. That was what had made so much noise that one terrible night. The other tribes were howling at the Osages, and the Osages were howling back at them. The other tribes did not dare fight Soldat Duchesne and all his Osages, so the next day they went away. That's one good Indian, Pa said. No matter what Mr. Scott said, Pa did not believe that the only good Indian was a dead Indian. And I think maybe Mr. Scott will change his mind too. See, the difference is Pa got to know them. So Pa met them in the woods, and he talked to them. And remember the one that came into the house, and they sat down and tried to make signs to each other? All it takes is getting to know somebody. Indians ride away. Oh, you have to look at this picture. So there's the house, and Pa and Ma and Laura and Mary are there. But if you look carefully, that line of Indians goes farther and farther. That would be something to see. There was another long night of sleep. It was so good to lie down and sleep soundly. Everything was safe and quiet. Only the owls called hoo, hoo in the woods along the creek, while the great moon sailed slowly over the curve of the sky above the endless prairie. In the morning, the sun shone warmly. Down by the creek, the frogs were croaking, "Grump, grump." They cried by the edge of the pools, "Needy, needy, better go round." Ever since Ma had told them what the frogs were saying, Mary and Laura could hear the words plainly. The door was open to let in the warm spring air. After breakfast, Pa went out, whistling merrily. He was going to hitch Pet and Patty to the plow again. But his whistling suddenly stopped. He stood at the doorstep, looking toward the east, and he said, "Come here, Caroline, and you, Mary and Laura." Laura ran out first, and she was surprised. The Indians were coming. They did not come on the creek road. They came riding up out of the creek bottoms far to the east. First came the tall Indian who had gone riding by the house in the moonlight. Jack, of course, was growling, and Laura's heart beat fast. She was glad to be close to Pa, but she knew this was the good Indian, the Osage chief who had stopped the other tribes. His black pony came trotting willingly, sniffing the wind that blew its mane and tail like fluttering banners. The pony's nose and head were free. It wore no bridle. Not even one strap was on it anywhere. There was nothing to make it do anything, and it didn't want to. Willingly, it came trotting along the old Indian trail as if it liked to carry the Indian on its back. So the ponies and the horses had nothing. No saddle, no bridle, no reins to pull them to the left or to the right. Nothing. Jack growled, trying to get loose from the cabin and from his chain. He remembered this Indian, and Pa said, "Be still, Jack." Jack growled again, and for the first time in their lives, Pa struck him. "Lie down. Be still," Pa said. Jack cowered, and he was still. Well, it was a kind Indian, and Jack just didn't understand. The pony was very near now, and Laura's heart beat faster and faster. She looked at the Indian's beaded moccasin. She looked up along the fringed legging that clung to the pony's bare side. A bright-colored blanket was wrapped around the Indian. One bare brown arm carried a rifle lightly across the pony's shoulders. Then Laura looked up at the Indian's fierce, still, brown face. It was a proud, still face. No matter what happened, it would always be like that. Nothing would change it. Only the eyes were alive in the face, and they gazed steadily far away to the west. They did not move. Nothing moved or changed except the eagle feathers standing straight up from the scalpbook on his shaved head. The long feathers swayed and dipped, waving and spinning in the wind as the tall Indian on the black pony passed on into the distance. "Duchesne himself," Pa said under his breath, and he lifted his hand in salute. But the happy pony and the motionless Indian went by. They went by as if the house and the stable and Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura were not there at all. Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura slowly turned and looked at the Indian's proud, straight back. Then other ponies and other blankets and shaved heads and eagle feathers came between, one by one on the path. More and more warriors were riding behind Duchesne. Brown face after brown face went by. Ponies' manes and tails blew in the wind. Beads glittered. Fringe flapped. Eagle feathers were waving on all over their heads. Rifles lying on ponies' shoulders bristled all along the line. Laura was excited about the ponies. There were black ponies, bay ponies, gray and brown and spotted ponies. Their little feet went trippity-trip, trip, trippity-trip, pat, patter, trippity, pat, patter, all along the Indian trail. Their nostrils widened at Jack, and their bodies shied away from him. But they came on bravely, looking with their bright eyes at Laura. "Oh, the pretty ponies! See the pretty ponies!" she cried, clapping her hands. "Look at the spotted one!" She thought she would never be tired of watching these ponies coming by. But after a while she began to look at the women and the children on their backs. The women and the children came riding behind the Indian men. Little naked brown Indians, no bigger than Mary and Laura, were riding the pretty ponies. The ponies did not have to wear bridles or saddles, and the little Indians did not have to wear clothes. All their skin was out in the fresh air and the sunshine. Their straight black hair blew in the wind, and their black eyes sparkled with joy. They sat on their ponies, stiff and still, like grown-up Indians. Laura looked and looked at the Indian children, and they looked at her. She had a naughty wish to be a little Indian girl. Of course, she did not really mean it. She only wanted to be bare in the wind with the sunshine and riding one of those gay little ponies. The Indian children's mothers were riding ponies too. Leather fringes dangled about their legs, and blankets were wrapped around their bodies, but the only thing on their heads was their black, smooth hair. Their faces were brown and placid. Some had narrow bundles tied on their backs, and tiny babies' heads stuck out of the top of the bundles. And we're going to read more about this long line of Indians tomorrow. Do you like that? Bye, boys and girls.